Greetings ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to today's Reddit Quickie video, taken from the HFY subreddit called Message in a Bottle. Written by AssualtKitten, the link to the original will be down below, and as always, I hope that you enjoy. Archival Document Viewer 3.3 Student Edition. Fluid Smart Translate GR is on. Credentials verified. Welcome back, Sarah Hellas. You have three unread messages in your message center. You have zero overdue assignments in your assignments folder. You have two pending assignments in your assignment folder. Notice: the document that you have requested on Thursday, February 19th, 394 ASC has been fully translated and uploaded to our servers. You will find the direct database link in the document in the message titled with the original name of the requested material. Notice addendum: I don't want to toot my own horn about being able to find it, but you really sent me a chase to get a full version of this passage. I had to go through about 30 sets of complete network images. That's like 2 weeks of passive searching per network image, by the way. Thanks, but we've got plenty of machines just for this kind of thing. Before I even got a match on the quoted passage, and another dozen after that before I found the salvageable raw text version of the document itself. A little cleanup and some cross-referencing later, and I think that you'll be pleased with the results. I hope that they're worth the wait. Best of luck with your thesis. The Document Acquisition Specialist T. Harmon. Accessing Message Center. Unread. Message in a Bottle, recounting the content of those who lived it. Anthology. Unread. Attention students, this month is our school's 220th anniversary. Unread. Hey, this is Cole. I know you've been busy, but Fenna is in town this weekend and she... Retrieving document. This document has been Fluid Smart Translated GR. If you want to view this document in its original language and wording, or wish to change the cross-check GR automatic footnotes, please check with the options menu by sliding diagonally twice with your input pad. Message in a Bottle. Recountings of contact from those who lived it. Edited by Merlin Tarvish. Note: a number of the questions asked in the interview in this passage are tangential and stated subject matter. These questions and answers are included in a document at the bottom of the main text. T. Harmon. Main text begins here. Interviewer: so, with that in mind, would you mind telling me about the Livonian culture and its reaction to the discovery of its wreckage in the essential spirit on your planet's moon? Almon Borelli. Yes, certainly. May I perhaps start with the time before that to give extra context to my answers? Interviewer: absolutely. A.B. Very good. Let us begin. Let us start with the situation of Livos at the time when the vessel first crashed into the moon. Across the 2 continents on our planet, there were 7 major ethnic groups affiliated with numerous cities and states. They were still dozens of language and dialects, and the most recent technological breakthroughs were word engines and a reliable process for forging steel. Interviewer: word engines, would those be devices for the mass production of the written material? A.B. That is correct. From what we learned from the box, it would be analogous to the human invention of movable print. Interviewer: and how long ago was that? A.B. Approximately 450 Earth years ago. I'm sorry, I always forget the exact conversion. It was 348 Lavosian years ago. Interviewer: so, it seems like the wreck of the essential spirit was recorded at the time that it happened. A.B. That's correct. It was thought to be the grim omen of the blackest depths of the night. It required numerous edicts from the prevailing spiritualist groups to quell the terror it caused. As I noticed in my responses to your earlier questions, Livos' second moon was where the wreck happened, and comparatively much closer to our planet than the moon of the human homeworld. Less than a century after the ship crashed, a combination of the seafloor dredging and silicate and advanced glass-making techniques produced the first telescope capable of detailed viewing of the ship itself. The scholars who proclaimed these results were almost executed before they implored the ruling family in the region to look for themselves at the ship that had rode the Black Night like a boat upon the water. See check note. Black Night is an archaic Lavosian religious reference. The Black Night was a fearsome place where the eternally sleeping dead dwell until the sun itself rises at the last time. It is also the root of the word for the term outer space. Interviewer: but the Lavosian technology wasn't anywhere near advanced enough to go to the moon at that point. How much longer did it take for that to happen? AB: a little over 200. It bears mentioning that the ship already bore heavy cultural significance. There were a handful of nights a year where that sun reflected properly off the wreckage and glinted brightly enough to be visible in the unaided eye. Once it became common knowledge that it was a ship, storytellers and hopeless romantics began to fixate upon it. There were hundreds of period dramas, science fiction stories, and adventure tales with the mythos of that vessel as their core element. With that said, however, we only achieved spaceflight after the end of our first global conflict. It was a conflict that spanned nearly 2 decades and left 2 out of every 5 Lavosians dead. While the wounds began to heal from the terrible conflict, the 2 remaining industrial powers, Niall and Betis, transitioned their arms production to weapons development to scientific study. While not publicly acknowledged, the 2 allied powers were hoping to solidify their power base permanently by being the first to claim whatever remained on the ship that had sat on the moon beckoning us for generations. And so, within a handful of years, TFOS had achieved the first spaceflight, and in another 10 we had prepared the first mission to explore the ship. Interviewer: how big of an event was this mission? AB: the event of a century, many called it at the time. My own mother and father heard the event broadcast live. Real-time video transmission had not yet been developed. So they crowded around the large radio receiver in my grandfather's house and listened to the history was made. The initial broadcast only lasted about 45 minutes, and only involved a brief look inside the ship. I need to mention the 2 statements that got hand in hand with the first exploration of the first broadcast. First, the first thing said was entered into the ship itself. This statement does not translate very well, but it is more than what I could dream. It was a fair approximation. It's a line from a classic work of fiction describing the interior of the ship. Hearing those words uttered in absolute reverence by one of the spacefarers, astronauts, who had sounded so calm and composed until that moment, was the cornerstone of the development of the modern Lavosian culture. The second statement was equally important, however. After exploring parts of the ship, after entering through a large breach in the hull, the crew came across one of several areas of the ship that received relatively little damage during the ship's crash landing: the forward suspension compartments. As was later determined by human investigation, the essential spirit had received severe damage from space debris while on a long-range scouting mission for potential colonization, leading all surviving crew to place the ship in an emergency power and go into suspended sleep. It was only after nearly a century of low-power flight that it became entangled in our planet's gravity well and crash-landed on our second moon. But we knew none of that. All that we knew was that the expeditionary lead set upon wiping some of the dark moon grit away from the viewing bay on the unpowered suspension chamber and confirmed its contents. We have found the sailors of the night, and they sleep forever. Interviewer: how long did a complete investigation of the ship take? AB: the first mission returned home after a single week. Preparations had been meticulous, but all the crew returning alive in good health was an initial set of samples far outweighed risking any more time necessary on the first venture. Since habitation materials had been sent up before the mission itself, making additional trips was relatively easy. With that in mind, the investigation of the ship was still ongoing by the time of contact. But the box was retrieved on the 6th mission, approximately 5 months after the first mission. Interviewer: that would be the Pullman cube, correct? AB: yes, that's correct. I apologize. I still find myself attached to the colloquial term. Interviewer: what year was that and the Pullman cube was brought back to TFOS? AB: 33 Lavosian years pre-contact. Interviewer: you were a scientist involved in the study of the cube, I believe. Can you tell me about that? AB: yes, and I would be glad. I came onto the project as a third-generation researcher, that is to say, 18 years into the project. By the time the vast majority of information contained within the box had already been discovered and catalogued. Before I discuss my own role, I would like to speak of the project's history. The box itself came back on the 6th mission, after the retrieval of a variety of cargo and bodies of the crew. Due to the unremarkable appearance, it was initially overlooked as an item of interest until some of the technicians in charge of moving it around the facility accidentally dropped it. Interviewer: Are you serious? AB, laughing: I'm quite serious. The impact of falling off the iron cart was enough to activate it. It had been handled with extreme care until that point. Clearly not enough for the box to believe that it was being handled by any kind of intelligent life. Fortunately for us, the technicians were being accompanied by a future head of the project itself, Scientific Dr. Neol. He quickly solved the lock on the box and was presented, and with an extreme foresight took notes as his first few minutes with the box. The interviewer: What was this lock? AB: A series of math and logic programs presented visually. I believe Dr. Neol had to display basic pattern recognition, knowledge of addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division, basic knowledge of geometry, and finally understanding of the concept of pi. That unlocked the first section of the box. A note on the Pullman cube. The Pullman cube was the device placed aboard every government-sanctioned spacefaring human vessel. This device, a cube measuring 3 feet on one side, would initially display a series of logic problems described visually that, once solved, would begin a multi-step complete education about humanity for any alien race who discovered it and unlocked it. Further information within the cube became available as more and more intricate problems were solved, culminating with problems that covered highly advanced engineering concepts, complex linguistic passages in a variety of human languages, and time-limited number of problems requiring machine computation to solve. The final unlock of the cube was the invitation from humanity to come and find them amongst the stars. The Pullman cube has fallen out of favor for several derivatives that have been improved with suggestions from the Lavosians and the emergent technology. AB continued. This was perhaps the single most important moment in the history of our race. From the cube itself we learned that you had never encountered an alien race from the dawn of your civilization. You reached out to the stars hoping that someone was out there besides you. Long ago we had wondered the same, but you had proved to us that we were not alone, without you even being knowing so. We listened to everything that you had to tell us, and we hung off every single word like eager children. First, the basic things. Human anatomy, biology, and the videos that you had taken of your home planet. It was so beautiful and so strange. Every corner of the globe was fixated on the materials that were captured and edited for broadcast to the general public. We learned the way that you count, the way that you used words, how your alien mouths made up the strange sounds of your languages. If I had to say that one thing struck me about what you had deigned to tell us, it was that in this second-to-last set of information unlocked, I was finished my own formal education at the time in hopes of becoming part of this very project. Motion pictures rarely used a media format outside of the current news, historical documentation, and human education programming, but with the permission of the Foundation overseeing the project, a team of what you might call filmmakers edited a vast amount of information that you provided about the 2 global conflicts that you had prior to taking to the stars into what amounts to dramatic documentaries. Instead of traditional historical documentation films, these were presented in a much the same tone as historical semi-fiction. See check note, an incredibly popular genre in Lavosian printed media. These stories used existing historical accounts and used first-person perspectives to extrapolate their narrative and highlighted dramatic elements within the historical settings. A cornerstone of the genre is that the stories do not ever contradict established historical facts, even if they embellish it. Literary works of this kind are best described as thoroughly well-researched and dramatically inclined biographies from the first person. AB continued. There was perhaps 10 of these episodes dedicated to the first global conflict, and a further 30 to the second. Narration was dubbed by the Lavosians' trade language, and the portions that had Earth languages were spoken were broadcast with subtitles. If we had adored humanity before this, Through learning of your greatest strife, we came to love you. You laid bare your failures, your weaknesses. You showed us what greatness you were capable of, and what evils that also lay in the heart of man. In that moment, we understood you. Our own failures, the horrors that we had committed against our own. Even then, we still hurt from those self-inflicted wounds. To see that another people had made the same mistakes that we had, who had hated their own for so many petty reasons, who had triumphed over those failings but never forgotten them. Pardon me, let me collect my thoughts. Do you know what the Lavosian term for human was before contact? It was T-man-N. It means brother you have not met. Interviewer, that's something else. Can you tell me about the contact then? AB, yes, certainly. In the last year leading up to contact, we had struggled over the final set of problems posed to us by the box. Despite a fairly strong command of your language, there were a handful of linguistic problems that would stymied our attempts to solve them. I had been assigned to the project for a number of years at that point, and having been part of the linguistic team assigned to solve the last set of word problems was beginning to become frustrating. There were 3 problems left to us, and frankly, none of them made any damn sense to us. The grammatical structure wasn't anything that we'd seen before. Words without a single matching instance were plentiful, and what we thought were strings of junk characters were thrown together into seemingly random combinations. We were honestly afraid that there might have been a data corruption. Interviewer, was there? AB, not at all. I need to give you a frame of reference, however. With all of this talk of humans, I've yet to mention the catalyst for the contact itself. The interviewer, that would be the Palon Expeditionary Force, then. AB, yes. I would imagine anyone reading this interview would be much more familiar with that particular bit of information. See check note. Palon Expeditionary Forces were small groups of military vessels that operated with a charter from the Palon central government as resource hunters, scouts, and cartographers. Until the treaty signed in 227 ASC, the United Species Alliance was officially at war with the Palon Federation, its various corporations, and their holdings. AB continued. When the Palons arrived, they didn't do it so quietly. When they dropped out of cold warp, note, slang terminology at the time for high-efficiency FDR travel methods. We had several hours before their vessels even properly materialized to monitor them. I have to say that this was where our exposure to humanity does us no favors. We could not even begin to imagine these vessels as hostile after the message of friendship that humanity had given to us. So, imagine our horror when we sent vessels up for diplomatic exchange, and as these ships fully fell out of their travel states, they immediately opened fire upon them. They had 15 ships, none greater than a corvette class, by your standards, but we simply had no answer for them. At the behest of humanity itself, we had curtailed the foray into nuclear weapons development, and our highest-flying air vehicles used rudimentary jet engines. So began the siege of Lavos. Despite their relative lack of firepower, they made quick work of any aircraft we launched, making landfall with half their ships setting up a base of operations, while the rest of the force defended them from low orbit. Interviewer, what were you doing at this time? AB, I was getting to that in a moment. When we visually confirmed that these aggressors weren't human, something that was both a great worry and a great relief to us, most major cities began evacuation. Those of us working with the box had the option to stay and keep working or to go with their families. Since I had no husband and no child, I was free from any guilt for my decision to stay and continue my work with what might be a dying days of my people. Interviewer, well, you clearly made some kind of breakthrough. What was it? AB, communication between members of the human language teams was usually done via text and wireless communication devices. It had become a de facto standard to send these messages in simplified English. Note, a widely used derivative form of Old English, a commonly used trade language used during the human intrasolar expansion, to other members of the group. Something I must mention is that precision is extremely important in Lavoisier writing. A missed character in a passage with dozens of others will completely alter the meaning of the entire section of writing. So, In this moment of high stress and sleep deprivation encroaching slowly but surely the weapons of alien foes laid to bear on our planet, I made a typo. The interviewer. Hold on. You made a typo. Could you, elaborate? AB. It's as simple as that. I sent a message that was not properly written. I asked for the time when a cooked fish dish comparable to 2 cheap unhealthy instant meals was going to be ready to break room. I misspelled not 1 but 2 words. As I was busy composing a corrected message, I received a reply that told me that it would be ready in 5 minutes. It took me nearly that long to properly process what exactly had happened, and what exactly it meant. I sent messages with multiple typos to half a dozen of the other project members, and all but one particularly mangled message was returned with the proper reply. Those damnable word problems that might as well have been tattooed on the back of my eyes after all of these years flitted before me in a half delirium. I shouted like a mad woman, dragged to the other members of the linguistic team to the box. I told them my theory and the lost problems, and was met with skepticism, and turned out outright shocked as I proceeded to solve the first of them while I explained what I had discovered. Our meals forgotten, we began to scratch the potential solutions and the lost problems the box held, sitting on the floor like children and squawking excitedly over the potential findings. Dr. Orrit, bless him, came up with the notion of using phonic readings of phrases and even numbers that carried us to the second solution within an hour. The final puzzle was more elusive, but finally succumbed when we stopped paying so much attention to the exact spellings of the words. Simply enough, the words began and ended with the same original letter and with the same total number of letters, but with junk between the two. Glancing over them would yield the correct solution, whereas careful inspection led to bafflement. When we entered the last answer, we were greeted with the last message humanity had for us. You have listened to what we have said. We await you amongst the stars. What things do you have to say to us? And below is the message on the black box's interface. One of the buttons was dimly lit. Trembling hands, I pressed it. The message on the screen changed. Press again to record and transmit voice. Note, the passage below is an account taken from one of the humans participating in the contact. It was presented as an audio transcription in an original publication, profanity included. Okay, alright, I'm Frank Bertley. I was one of the pilots who was part of the whole, contact thing. That's what they're calling it now, right? So, alright. We were posted at basically in the middle of nowhere, we being the 54th Deep Space Defensive Corps. If you don't know what we were, Deep Space Defense is a heavy firepower that gets the rear end of guarding borders and human-controlled space. It may seem a little counterintuitive having big guns for fast response, but we've pretty much always got a capital-class ship or two kicking around with us. Basically, we're armed to the teeth and constantly waiting to get dropped into the thick of it at whatever awful mess the Palian or the Makra have cooked up for us. So, we get the usual treatment of blaring klaxons. All hands on deck, roll your sorry rears out of bed and into your clothes. That kind of thing. So, sometimes they'll only roll out some of us of these things. But I hear plenty of rumbling about the whole fleet of us moving out to take care of something as I'm getting suited up. There was maybe a full 3,000 on the same ship as me, and it looks like they're getting everyone set to go as I'm running my pre-flight checks from the cockpit of my MM-98. Note, a model of troop transport aircraft capable of limited spaceflight and atmospheric re-entry. So they get all my boys in their Sunday best. Note, parable slang terminology for the exosuits used by human infantry at the time, and buckled in for the warp in when we finally got our orders. First off, they tell us we're going to be hot warping in, which is a sure sign that things have gone pear-shaped. See check note, hot warping is a terminology used to refer to low-efficiency FDR travel. Unlike cold warping or phase dropping, hot warping requires tremendous amounts of energy to maintain, but all of that matter is transferred into the desired location at the same time instead of being transferred over time and then dropped in the end of the process. But then we get the heads up of what we need to pay pretty close attention because we were about to handle some seriously important crap. So me and the boys are all waiting for whatever it is so important that they're hot warping 2 capital ships with full accompaniment to take care of. The grainy, but still distinguishable audio clip played through my helmet. The voice's English sounds like, super off, but you could still understand the words. If these words ever reach you, know that humanity did have friends among the stars. Those hopes that you were not alone. We received them. Even in the face of our own end, we think of you. Even if our bones are ground to dust, and the earth we tread on has turned to ash, I hope that you may one day find what remains of us and lay it to rest. Good night, brothers. So I'm thinking to myself, well, that's a real downer, but why do they have us hauling rear to the absolutely middle of nowhere when we could be sleeping for dead, albeit chummy aliens? When we get a goddamn admiral taking us next. That message was received by an unmanned observation station on the edge of our borders. We have determined from the information provided to us that this message on the FTL ping of the Pullman cube set off after being solved as the message was sent less than 6 days ago. Considering the given location of the planet, it is highly likely that any hostile forces we encounter in orbit are payloads. Your commanding officers will break down your specific mission objectives. Good luck, everyone. One crackle later, my squad commander is barking out a roll call of his pilots, and the console on my baby, note, probably referring to his aircraft, is giving me a little over half an hour real time until we drop in on flight. After affirming that my rear is in the pilot seat, along with my squad mates, my squad commander starts to give his rendition of the battle plan. The rough outline was simple. There were likely only token group of Palon attacking this planet, but Command had determined the show of force was highly appropriate. They'd sent a ship full of nerds, note, a colloquialism for derogatory implications in reference to intelligence by societally inept individuals, to come with us. So we were going to thunderfreck everything in orbit and flex for our alien fans before dropping the eggheads. Note, see above note. Off to go do some science stuff while we set up a temporary FTL junction and made sure no one else got funny ideas about attacking the planet who wanted to be besties with us humans. We spent the rest of the trip, short as it was, in amicable silence. This wasn't going to be much of a tough sell for as far as the fight to go, so most of us fellas, myself included, probably ended up wondering if we were finally going to get to see some cute alien girls. Nothing in the known galaxy came even close, of course, but a guy can dream, right? So after a bit of self-reflection, we hit the last 60 seconds, then to get to rumble. We drop out of the hot warp close enough that we'll probably look over another sun for a couple seconds to anyone down on the planet, and our part of the fleet breaks off to take care of any problems on the ground. 5 minutes after we drop in, we're hitting the atmosphere. CO tells us that the air is not going to kill us, but we'd probably end up with pneumonia if we breathed it raw for a week. By the time the hangar doors are open, all the way up, we're seeing incoming laser fire, that ugly red crap that the Palons use, arcing towards and past us. Soon, it's careening off our shields of our carrier. We hightailed it out of the hangar and make a break for it, towards the clearings that we can find at drop points of our passengers. My luck being crap as always, I take a nasty hit on my way down. It's a damn miracle that we only half crashed. And twice as lucky we went down in a copse of funky looking trees, well out of the line of fire. Most of my boys haul ass out of the back without a hitch, and the rest are busy untangling themselves from the twisted up seat belts, or getting their legs back under them after the crash. But I definitely drew the short end of the stick. I'm being strangled by my own seatbelt, and one of my arms is very, very broken, along with my helmet. Well, adding insult to injury, I can see smoke coming off the fuselage from behind me. I turn around to holler at someone to come and cut me out when I realize that the entrance to the cockpit has been twisted around so bad a kid couldn't crawl through it. Now, we don't leave anyone behind in this line of work, but I am beginning to realize how properly freaked I might be. The last of my boys hops out of the back, but with the cockpit in a kind of shape it was, I ought to be dead, and they got plenty other problems than to double check to make sure that the pilot isn't just partially hamburger. So I'm really hoping everything explodes before the fire gets me when the whole ship shudders. It was a whump, thump thump sound coming from on top of me. And then I see 2 pairs of arms bigger than you'd freaking believe, with claws as long as my hand, smashing straight through the remaining glass of the cockpit. I see 2 of these aliens, at least 7 feet tall each, decked out in the crap that looks right out of an intrasolar period piece. Note from roughly 660 to 410 pre-Alliance star calendar, when humanity was first colonizing their own solar system with entirely sublight propulsion. With a full camouflage composite plating and what looks like a solid projectile weapon slung over their shoulders. But what really gets me is that they just start peeling off the top of my cockpit like it wasn't a big deal. That crap is designed to take hits from small asteroids, and those 2 tear the fricker straight off with a pinch and 20 feet away. Not only that, but they pull out a couple of knives, and I'm wondering what way the wind's gonna blow on this, when one of them hack right at me with a seatbelt, and one slings me over its shoulder with one arm, while the other takes a quick look around the ship. Now we're up 15 feet off the ground, but this dude jumps down, no problem, and starts hauling ass back towards the copse of trees. At this point, my arm hurts so damn bad that I'm seeing stars. But I can see more of these aliens picking their way through the trees, some of them carrying boxes and other equipment, and a few even carrying more humans. Right when I'm ready to give up on staying conscious, the alien carrying me comes up to a long, low building covered with stuff that looks like fronds from these weird trees. He carries me inside and sets me down on a table. The whole place smells like rubbing alcohol, and there's a thin, glossy sheeting all over the walls and hanging like curtains around a number of other beds. I just got my ass hauled to an alien triage center. So I finally get a decent look at the fella who carried me in, since he's taken the time to stand over me while some of the other aliens, in medical gear that looked like it used to be white muscle from the table to table, 7 feet tall and maybe a little more, seemed about right. I could see dun-colored feathers poking out from under the edges of the helmet and obscured the rest of his face. And his hands each had 2 large talons and shorter thumb-looking things. It was definitely bipedal, but it was wearing pants and presumably some kind of shoe too. I didn't have much longer to gawk, because it was my turn with the doctor. It made weird-ass clucking and clicking sounds as it prodded my arm and removed my helmet, surprisingly making sure not to jostle my rebreather out of my mouth. It cleaned up the cuts on my head with some crap that burned super bad for a few seconds before whipping up a crude split for my arm and securing it as best it could. It looked like it was made out of a couple of the rifle stocks bolted together, but it was definitely did the trick. I was still in a bad way, but the golden rule of the well-run triage tent is to get people through as fast as you can. And I ended up being moved to a cot 2 rooms over with a number of other casualties. Even though I managed to limp there under my own power, my rescuer didn't seem interested in leaving me be. I settled onto a bed, which was more of a sturdy stretcher, to be honest. And even I soon noticed the prying eyes of the other wounded. All of them were aliens. Some had burns, one was missing a hand, another had both of its legs stabilized with gunstock splints, like my own. The one right next to me had a number of small wounds right on the side of its face, and was sporting a mass of gauze over 2 of its eyes. Finally, looking at one of the guys without a helmet or medical gear on, I saw that they had 2 pairs of eyes, and what looked like a kind of short beak at the end of a slightly jutting jaw. The one who with the gauze on his face tilted his head and looked at me properly. The whole room seemed oddly quiet. After an uncomfortably long silence, it spoke. "You are human. Do you speak English?" Its tone was off, and the accent, if you could call it that, was thick. "Yeah, I do. Is there something you want to ask?" The gauze rocked his head back and forth and chortled something under the aliens in the room. The one who had carried me in was clearly listening intently. After a moment, he turned back to readdress me. "Yes, we wish to know, what human motion picture do you like the most?" I ended up spending the next 3 days in the triage center playing Q&A with these guys while the rest of the payloads got cleaned up and the capital ships made official contact with the remaining governments on the planet. I got picked up on my 3rd night there, and I was almost sad to get properly patched up. The fellas in the triage center were kind of odd at first, But I slowly got filled in through the calls and the translations he did for the other patients, the whole Pullman cube thing, and I came to understand why exactly these guys were so starstruck. Imagine human culture if we had never wondered about the existence of life besides us out in the stars. From the day that Galileo builds his first telescope, you have an absolutely unshakable answer. We are not alone. Now, when we put a man on the moon, he comes back with pictures of alien corpses. Even beyond that, the very bodies are the aliens that prove that life exists in the vast depths of space. You find their message in a bottle and hope that there is life amongst the stars besides their own. And perhaps one day they can even meet in friendship. We aren't just some little green men that bailed them out of a rough situation. Our very existence has shaped their culture and outlook for centuries. We were the stuff their hopes or dreams were made of, the basis for their wildest science fiction, a living legend. And when they cried out desperately into the vastness of space, hoping the same hope that someone else would hear their message, who else came in their hour of need but humans, the aliens that they so adored? Even then, we did not simply come to their aid. We burst into the sky like a second sunrise and smote their foes like a hammer of a vengeful god. In a single moment, we met and surpassed every single expectation that they could possibly have set for our first meeting. And it's all because we wanted them to know how big our dicks were when we rode into town. To be honest, I'm kind of jealous of them. End of main text, document closing, exiting program. And that, my friends, is the end of this Reddit Quickie. I hope that you enjoyed. If you'd like to support this channel, there are numerous ways to do so, listed in the description down below. The easiest and best way would be to share this video and my channel as much as possible. I'll see you all in the next video, and I hope that you have a good one until then. Cheers. P.S. With all the changes in YouTube recently, it has become more a case of when my account will get banned rather than if my account will be banned, the same as everyone else. If you look down below, there is a link to my SoundCloud account where everything gets backed up. I recommend that you follow that account just in case something happens to this account. Other than that, everything will still continue as normal. Thanks. Cheers.